Raider Nation, what's going on? You're watching the Raiders Report, and today's mailbag was filmed Thursday night just for reference. If you want to join us during our live shows, please make sure you do so. I would recommend you hit the subscribe button and you turn on those notifications. That way, when we go live, you get a notification that, hey, the Raiders Report is live. Let's go to OG Bloodstain. How much will it cost for Isaiah Simmons? I would say if the Raiders wanted to go out and get Isaiah Simmons in a trade, because remember, his fifth-year option was declined by the Arizona Cardinals, and much like a lot of the conversation's been around Patrick Queen, if Patrick Queen, he'd probably go for fourth, fifth-round pick at this point. I think he'd probably go for a fifth is what I would offer. I would also offer a fifth-round pick for Isaiah Simmons, and the biggest reason I do that, I know Arizona's not trying to win this year. There is nothing about that roster that hints to me that they are trying to win this year. So you try to buy low, go out and get Simmons, a player who I loved when he was coming out of Clemson. And if you use him the correct way, I think he'd be a hell of a player in a 4-2-5. I'll tell you that right now. Let's go to Mount Raider legend John Borelli. Bring back Casey Hayward. Stop effing around, McDummy. I love Hayward, and for those that watch the show know that when the Raiders brought him in, I was ecstatic. Hell, when the Raiders brought in Deron Harmon, I was like, that's going to be your Casey Hayward type of player where he's a coach on the field, he knows the system. The problem is Hayward was a good fit with the Gus Bradley system, very zone-heavy, where now with Patrick Graham and a lot of the moves that they've made, I kind of think they're going to run a lot of man, and they're going to try to run press man. That's not Casey Hayward's strong suit. However, if you do plan on running 35% of zone, I'll put Casey Hayward out in the zone because I think he might be your best zone cornerback right now. Let's go to Dill. Mitch, Brady could turn down his Fox deal. If he does, could he come to the Raiders? Sorry, really sucked at reading that one. So, yeah, there was a report out today that apparently Tom Brady is thinking about turning down his 10-year was like $357 million. Everyone spam bless you to Chugs if you heard that in the background. He could turn down 10 for $357. I'll tell you this right now. I get that he has all the money in the world. If he turns down 10 for $357, I think he's coming back to football. I really do. I don't know if the Raiders would be his number one pick. I think the Dolphins might be that number one choice. But the thing would be interesting is this. If the Raiders wanted to, they could move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. But my question is this. Let's say Brady comes back to the NFL. You know McDaniels wanted Tom Brady. You know that Ziegler wanted Tom Brady. What would you want? Jimmy Garoppolo or Tom Brady? Who's the better quarterback? Type JG for Jenny Garoppolo or type TB for Tommy Brady? Right now, if you could tell me who I have a better chance of getting 16, 17 games out of, it's Brady. On a per-game basis, I might still take Brady over Garoppolo. I'd probably still take Brady over Garoppolo. It's close, though, man. It's close. Let's go to the next question. Rolling in here. It's from Tyler. Trade for Queen and get either Van Noy or Peters. What do you think? Would you rather Peters or Van Noy? Personally, I would rather Kyle Van Noy. I think Kyle Van Noy can still play at a high enough level compared to Marcus Peters is a little bit of a coin flip. I do think Peters would fill a bigger void than Van Noy, but also Van Noy, to me, the versatility that he brings as an edge rusher, as a linebacker, and for his ability to still drop back into coverage, I'm going to go with Van Noy, and if you had to ask me which one I would want more. Also, much cheaper. B-Ray, do you think Patrick Graham could rehabilitate a cornerback like Shaquille Griffin? I do. I mean, Shaquille, not too long ago was a really good player, and he didn't really suffer any major injuries. To me, a lot of times, it comes down to fit. And if you're just a bad fit with a certain defense, a lot of turnover maybe with the coaching staff, that can really impact the player. And if he's motivated, if he signs a one-year deal, a prove-it deal in a tax-free state like Las Vegas, he's got a chance to make a little extra money. What up, Doug? Sign LeBron as a linebacker for the silver and black. Probably not going to bring in LeBron as a linebacker, though. LeBron, much better linebacker than Steph Curry could ever be. And if you had to ask me, could LeBron James play in the NFL at tight end? That'd be something fun to watch. LeBron at tight end, different question. Let's go to Raider Dan. Mitch, since the Raiders added the pathway player, who will get cut? It's actually a really good question, Dan. I broke down the story on Thursday of the Raiders adding the pathway player from Nigeria whose name right now is escaping me. I remember his first name was David. But just because usually if the Raiders are at 90 guys, which they were at 90 guys, you added the pathway player to now you're at 91 out of 90. Ibuka Agoha. David Ibuka Agoha. They added him. You actually don't have to cut a player. So because he's a pathway guy, the Raiders are now allowed to have 91 players on the roster. He'll be with the team until after minicamp, and then if they want to move on from him then, they can, and if they want to keep him, they also can. So with pathway players, it's something to at least keep in mind. You still have to get down to 53, though. Non-stop Raiders videos all year long. Plus, we are 100% for free. So if you're not subscribed, hit that sub button. I promise you this. We're going to have a good time every show that we do. We are always going to keep you up to date. And if you don't like what you watch after a week, unsubscribe. You have nothing to lose. And if you're looking for a place that parties like old Oakland tailgates, give me one live show. And I think you're going to enjoy what we do around here. Let's go to Shep. What's up, brother? If the Raiders finish with the top 5 worst record next year, do they have an out on Garoppolo's contract? Yes, they do have an out on Garoppolo's contract. You can trade Jimmy G, and you get basically you don't have to eat anything. If you cut him, you still have to eat a little bit of money. You eat like $11 million, but you can still move on from a rather large amount. So you're paying him $16.3 this year, and then it's $28 million, and then essentially $28 million again. You can get out of more than whatever that math is. So you'd still have to eat $11 million, though, in order to do it. Unless the team trades for him. But let's be real. Nobody's going to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. Let's go to Raji Gaines. They both work in the system, and I say keep them both. Get rid of Brian Hoyer. Unfortunately, Garoppolo will not be a backup, and Tom Brady will not be a backup. I love the idea. If that was the idea, you bring in Brady, you bring in Garoppolo, I bet you then you trade away Tom Brady. Because there'd be a team like the Dolphins that'd be willing to give up, I think, picks for Tom Brady. Let's go to Hillside. Suh is still out there. Back to the Ndamukong Suh questions. Could it happen? If it didn't happen last year, I don't see why it's going to happen this year. The Raiders, in their mind, probably have depth at the defensive tackle position. You drafted 2 guys last year. You drafted 2 guys this year. You have Bilal Nichols. You re-signed Jerry Tillery. And then I know the Raiders for a fact like Adam Butler. And I also know the fact that they like John Jenkins. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Raiders at defensive tackle. But no, unfortunately, I don't think Suh, though it'd be sick, man. If Suh was a Raider, we would go nuts on that show. I just don't think it's going to happen. So how about this? You're McDaniels, you're Ziegler. Should the Raiders sign Ndamukong Suh? Give me a yes. Give me a no. I'll be looking in the comments. Let's go to David. I can't handle any more Patriot players, so neither. It's amazing to me. You know, people are like, oh, Mitch, the Raiders don't have that many Patriots players. You overblow it a lot. I'm like, well, if you consider the fact that 20% of the roster has some sort of New England tie, it's kind of a lot of players. And then if you consider over 40% of the coaching staff has some sort of New England tie, I think that's a lot. I hear you, David. You and me and a lot of Raider Nation probably agree on this one. And then Ezekiel. What's up, Ezekiel? Who do you think will have the better NFL career, Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson? It's an incredible question. And I'm going to base it off of the team that has had more success with defensive players and overall the prospect that I like more. And for that reason, I will say Will Anderson. I had Will Anderson ranked as my number 1 edge. I had Tyree Wilson ranked as my number 2 edge. I think both are going to have great careers, but Will Anderson to me is probably going to have the better career. Antonio Martinez, who is someone we can realistically trade for that's a cornerback? Realistically trade for that's a cornerback. I'm trying to think of all the names right there that are out there. I haven't done too many cornerback trade videos. Chugs is saying Levi Wallace from the Steelers. Greg Newsome from the Browns could be another name to keep in mind. Off the top of my head, those are the first 2 guys. But to me, I'll also say this. There's still some cornerbacks out there that you could sign that you don't necessarily need to go break the bank for. But I wish if you were going to trade for a corner, the cornerback that you should have traded for was Jeff Okudah. Mario, how many sacks for Tyree Wilson? This year, I would set the over-under at 4.5. I would set the Tyree Wilson sacks at 4.5, and I would like to be able to bet the over. I really would. Obviously, I'm a little cautious let's go 5.5. With Raider fans, I'll go 5.5 sacks. Type O for over, type U for under, over, 5.5 sacks for Tyree Wilson this upcoming season. We do have one more question here on today's mailbag, and it's coming in from Jake. What up, Jake? You think Tyree will be pushed inside a lot this year? I don't know if it'll be a lot, but I do think Wilson's going to play inside. He's going to play outside. For the people out there that think Tyree is just going to be a bench player when Chandler's on the field, that's not true. I'm telling you right now, they will find ways to get Tyree Wilson on the field. He is a monster of a human being. Like, people look at Crosby, and Crosby's long, he's giant, like, he looks big out on the field. Wilson's bigger than Crosby. Like, got a bigger wingspan. He is an athletic freak. They will find places for Tyree Wilson out there on the field. To stay up to date on the latest news, it's Twitter. To interact with me on Instagram, it's at MitchellRents365. If you want to stay up to date on everything going on around this team, and if I missed your question on today's show, when I get free time, which honestly anymore, it basically means it's me taking a dump. So this weekend I'm going to be pretty busy. If you want to hang out with Chugs, I realized Chugs is in the background going, talk about this. I'm like, I am talking about Twitter. And then I realized it says Jeremy Chugs. So how about this, everyone? Go follow Jeremy Chugs on Twitter right now. Do it. If you follow Jeremy Chugs on Twitter, I'm going to give you a shout out on live. So the people who are watching live, I got you covered. If you're not watching us on live, go follow Jeremy anyway.